As you may know, a dog is often considered a man's best friend, but in this case, the dogs of crime victims have become the best allies, not of their owners, but of the investigators trying to solve a bloody crime in Palm Beach, Florida. This area, known for its wealthy residents and opulent mansions, has a surprising dark side. Despite its reputation as a paradise, Palm Beach has a high crime rate, and the number of crimes continues to rise. Kattie and Jeffrey LMP lived in one of the wealthier neighborhoods of Palm Beach. Kattie had a tough childhood. Her parents divorced when she was young, and she stayed with her father. During her teenage years, she struggled with emotional issues, which led to weight loss. Although she was once heavier than her peers, she gradually gained confidence, especially with the support of her stepmother. Kattie became more active, started playing sports, and eventually shed the weight that once caused her distress. Kattie was bright, kind, and active, traits that helped her make friends during high school, where she met Jeffrey. At 17 and 16, they quickly became a couple, and after graduating, they continued their relationship. 2 years later, they secretly married, shocking their families. Despite the pressure from their parents, the couple stood firm and built a life together. They struggled financially at first, but both were determined to succeed. Jeffrey worked at a local parking lot, while Kattie, who had trained as a pharmacist, began working at a local pharmacy. Kattie's career quickly flourished. She soon became a lead pharmacist and was later promoted to district planner for drug distribution. Jeffrey, on the other hand, remained a tow truck driver. Together they worked hard, and after several years they were able to buy their dream home. However, tragedy struck on June 15, 2004. Jeffrey returned home from work around 7 p.m. and immediately noticed something was wrong. Blood was splattered across the walls, and it seemed like something out of a horror movie. In a panic, he called 911, describing a scene of unimaginable violence. At the end of the hallway, he found his wife Kattie, lying motionless, surrounded by blood. The brutality of the attack was evident. Her skull was severely crushed, and her face was unrecognizable. The murder weapon, though never found, was believed to be a heavy, elongated object with a hexagonal end. Jeffrey had tried calling his wife multiple times that day, but when he received no response, he rushed home to check on her. What he didn't know was that not only had Kattie been brutally attacked, but so had their 3 dogs. The 2 of Kattie's dogs were found beaten near her body, their injuries so severe that they had to be euthanized. Jeffrey's dog, however, was found locked in a bedroom unharmed. What was most puzzling was that blood was found on the dogs, likely from a struggle between the attacker and the dogs. Investigators soon realized that the criminal must have been seriously injured, possibly with a deep wound that would have required medical attention. The attacker was likely bleeding profusely, and it seemed that the dogs had fought back during the attack. The police began searching for leads. They checked local hospitals for anyone with injuries consistent with a violent struggle, but found no one fitting the description. Neighbors were interviewed, but no one had seen anything unusual. The investigation soon shifted to the motive. Despite the wealth in the home, the only thing missing were Kattie's diamond earrings, something that seemed more personal than a robbery gone wrong. The crime scene suggested that robbery wasn't the motive. The house was untouched, and valuables like money and expensive items were left behind. The investigators speculated that the killer's goal was more personal, perhaps something connected to Kattie herself. While they awaited forensic results, all eyes were on Jeffrey, who was understandably the first suspect. However, his alibi seemed solid, and the police continued to pursue other leads. The man was on his work shift at the time of the murder. There were many company employees who could confirm his presence at work. Moreover, he was perfectly safe and unharmed, which seemed impossible if he had been in contact with the dogs. Detectives were ready to cross him off the suspect list, but then an unexpected visitor arrived at the family home. A young woman named Joy Steele introduced herself as Jeffrey's fiancée, which surprised the police, especially since earlier, Jeffrey had been seen crying and distressed at the scene of his wife's murder. The sight of the widower being comforted by his fiancée, with whom he had a long-term affair, raised many questions. The situation became even more suspicious when it was revealed that 7 years into their marriage, Kattie had discovered Jeffrey's infidelity. Despite this, she never divorced him, as she didn't love anyone else and wanted to keep her family intact. Jeffrey, however, continued his affair with Joy, and this caused significant tension between the couple. The detectives were now considering whether Jeffrey had any involvement in his wife's death. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Jeffrey had a strong motive. For years, the couple had faced serious financial struggles, with Jeffrey being caught stealing $30,000 from his previous employer. He had promised to repay the stolen amount, but had not yet managed to do so. His job, working as a tow truck driver, provided only a modest income that barely covered basic household expenses. Meanwhile, Kattie was the primary breadwinner. Despite living in a wealthy area, Jeffrey had never been able to contribute significantly to the family's finances, which caused tension. In the weeks leading up to the murder, Jeffrey's financial troubles had worsened. He was unable to pay the debt he owed and had no other way to settle the amount. That's when he realized that Kattie had a life insurance policy worth $29,000, a sum that seemed modest but could solve his financial problems. This made the investigators suspect that Jeffrey might have seen his wife's death as an opportunity to get out of his financial troubles. When the police arrived at the crime scene, they discovered something strange. Among the 3 dogs that lived with the couple, 2 were severely injured and had to be put down. However, Jeffrey's dog, which was the largest and most dangerous of the 3, was found locked in a bedroom, completely unharmed. The strange part was that the dog had not tried to protect its owner during the attack. The police began to wonder why this particular dog had not fought back, especially given the violent nature of the crime. It became clear to the detectives that the only logical explanation was that Jeffrey's dog knew the attacker, because it was Jeffrey himself. Experts in animal behavior confirmed that the dog's behavior was consistent with being familiar with the intruder, even to the point of not resisting the attack. This led investigators to reconsider Jeffrey's role in the murder. In the meantime, one of the detectives interviewed Joy Steele. She spoke about their plans for the future and mentioned how Jeffrey had planned to leave Kattie. Joy claimed to have a solid alibi for the time of the murder, saying she was working at a restaurant and could be confirmed by several witnesses. She also showed no injuries on her body. Despite her alibi, detectives kept her under suspicion, as she had a clear motive. She was in a long-term affair with Jeffrey and stood to benefit from Kattie's death. As the investigation continued, the police also looked into Lisa, another one of Jeffrey's mistresses. Several weeks before Kattie's murder, Lisa's husband had caught Jeffrey at their house, sitting shirtless on the sofa with Lisa. The confrontation led to Jeffrey being thrown out of the house, and Lisa's husband had threatened him with violence if he ever returned. This made Lisa's husband a strong suspect, but the investigators couldn't figure out why he would target Kattie specifically. Lisa's husband was as much a victim in the situation as Kattie was, and there was no clear reason for him to kill her. The police also learned that Jeffrey had continued to communicate with Lisa after the confrontation, and phone records confirmed that they had been in contact around the time of the murder. However, Lisa and her husband both had solid alibis, and neither of them had injuries, so they were ruled out as suspects. The police then decided to track the geolocation of both Jeffrey and Lisa's phones. Surprisingly, they discovered that Jeffrey's phone had been in the vicinity of the family home just minutes after the murder. This contradicted his earlier statement that he had been at work. Furthermore, the fact that Jeffrey's dog was unharmed during the attack raised even more suspicions. The dog's behavior was not random. It was as though it recognized the attacker and didn't react. This led the detectives to conclude that the killer was likely someone very close to the family. Forensic analysis revealed that traces of blood were found on Jeffrey's dog. The blood was confirmed to be Kattie's, which meant that the dog had been near her during or after the attack. This was a crucial clue, as it indicated that Jeffrey's dog had been involved in the aftermath of the murder. Investigators were now certain that Jeffrey was the perpetrator, but they still needed concrete proof to arrest him. The police continued their search for more evidence, and eventually they turned their attention to Jeffrey's clothing. He had been wearing a dark outfit when he met the police at the scene, and forensic experts examined it carefully. While the initial examination didn't reveal any blood or DNA evidence, experts decided to look at the clothing under a microscope. They discovered several tiny red drops on the inside of Jeffrey's jeans, which were later confirmed to be blood, Kattie's blood. This was the breakthrough the investigators had been waiting for. With this evidence in hand, Jeffrey was arrested and charged with his wife's brutal murder. The motive, financial desperation, a troubled marriage, and the lure of insurance money became clear. The shocking nature of the crime and the betrayal of someone so close to Kattie left everyone stunned. Forensic scientists were certain that the red drops found on Jeffrey's clothing were blood. The stains had penetrated deep into the fabric fibers, indicating that the blood had splashed at high speed, consistent with the nature of the injuries Kattie sustained. These bloodstains couldn't have resulted from accidental contact. The blood was clearly from Kattie, as confirmed by DNA testing. If Jeffrey had simply found his wife's body and tried to help her, the blood would have been found outside, not inside his clothing, and not in such a pattern. However, the investigation revealed an even bigger surprise when a detailed examination of Jeffrey's belongings turned up a gold earring with a diamond, which, according to his statement, had been stolen during the attack. This was obviously planted by Jeffrey himself in an attempt to stage a robbery. He likely kept the earring for fear that it would be traced back to him at a pawn shop. To strengthen their case, the police were still in need of the murder weapon. Despite their efforts, it took 2 months before a breakthrough occurred. Jeff, while working at his tow truck job, found a hexagonal pry bar on the roof of a building. This tool was part of the standard kit provided to all employees, but on this particular pry bar, there was a significant amount of blood. Jeff was unable to produce his own crowbar from his work kit, claiming that he had lost it. This raised suspicions that the pry bar found at the scene was indeed his, and that he had hidden it at the workplace after the crime. Forensic specialists then analyzed the pry bar and found that the geometry of the bloodstains matched the injuries on Kattie's head. Furthermore, DNA analysis confirmed that the blood on the pry bar belonged to Kattie. This evidence was critical, and Jeffrey was arrested and charged with premeditated murder. Investigators had already learned that Jeffrey had often complained to his friends about his unsuccessful marriage. According to him, Kattie was completely unable to maintain the house or clean properly, which frustrated him. However, he ignored the fact that Kattie was the family's primary breadwinner, working hard to support their household. Jeffrey, on the other hand, was incapable of contributing significantly to their finances. He was also known for his many infidelities, which only increased the tension between the couple. Kattie, despite knowing about some of these affairs, still hoped to restore her marriage and continued to endure Jeffrey's mistreatment. She couldn't bring herself to divorce him, even though she had repeatedly complained to friends about his behavior. It was clear to the police that Jeffrey's frustration, combined with financial desperation, had pushed him to murder. The situation became clearer when investigators discovered that Jeffrey had stolen $30,000 from his previous employer, which had worsened his financial troubles. He still owed a large sum of money and was unable to pay it back. Kattie's life insurance policy, which was worth $29,000, seemed like the only way out of his financial crisis. Divorce would have meant the division of property and the loss of his house, which would leave him with nothing. Jeffrey's plan was to kill his wife and use the life insurance payout to clear his debts and start a new life with one of his mistresses. He had promised both Joy and Lisa, his lovers, that he would leave Kattie, but it remained unclear which woman he planned to choose. On the day of the murder, Jeffrey went to work, then made a stop at a gas station under the pretext of refueling his tow truck. However, he returned home before Kattie did and waited for her. Once she arrived, he attacked her, and the violent chaos began. Jeffrey killed the dogs that tried to intervene, using a tire iron to strike them in the head. His own dog was locked away in a room and unharmed. Afterward, Jeffrey removed the diamond earrings from Kattie's ears and staged the scene to look like a robbery. He discarded some of his clothes but failed to notice the bloodstains on his jeans. This oversight allowed investigators to find the tiniest drops of Kattie's blood on his clothing, linking him directly to the crime. The police also tracked Jeffrey's phone, which had pinged near his home just after the murder, despite his earlier claim of being at work. This was another significant clue that contradicted his alibi. After the murder, Jeffrey discarded the pry bar on the roof of a company building, believing it would never be found. But 2 months later, investigators recovered it, and its forensic evidence tied it to the murder. The crowbar's surface showed traces of Kattie's blood, and the geometry of the wounds on her head perfectly matched the pry bar. Jeffrey was arrested, and with all the evidence stacked against him, he was charged with premeditated murder. In addition to the forensic evidence, many people testified about Jeffrey's financial struggles and infidelities. Friends of the family reported that Jeffrey had confided in them about his desire to divorce Kattie, which would allow him to avoid splitting their assets. Kattie's friends also recalled her enduring pain due to Jeffrey's behavior, including his lack of financial contribution and his repeated cheating. Despite these issues, Kattie loved Jeffrey and hoped their relationship would improve. However, for Jeffrey, murder seemed like a more practical solution than divorce. He needed the insurance money to pay off his debts, and once Kattie was out of the picture, he could start over with his mistress. This was all part of his plan, and the evidence, from bloodstains to the discarded murder weapon, supported his guilt. The prosecution presented a strong case showing that Jeffrey's motive was both financial and personal. He had a clear plan to kill his wife, stage a robbery, and collect the life insurance money to pay off his debts and start a new life. The police also proved that Jeffrey's lovers, Lisa and Joy, were not involved in the murder. Although they were aware of Jeffrey's plans, they didn't actively participate or help in the crime. At trial, Jeffrey's defense attempted to cast doubt on the investigation, arguing that the police hadn't fully explored other potential suspects. However, the prosecution countered that all leads had been thoroughly investigated and that Jeffrey's involvement was irrefutable. The evidence, including his blood-stained clothing, the murder weapon, and his phone records, clearly linked him to the crime scene. In September 2006, Jeffrey was found guilty of premeditated murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. While being escorted to prison, Lisa, one of his mistresses, broke down in tears when the verdict was announced. Kattie's family, on the other hand, felt that justice had been served. Kattie's mother stated that Jeff deserved to rot behind bars for the rest of his life. Thank you for watching.